Yeah, hello and welcome to this session of deep dives into the products. The first deep dive session is about the all new experience portals. And while we saw in the keynote session all the front end and all the features there, in this deep dive session, we will deep dive a bit under the hood and see what configurations we have available and also, of course, what are the concepts behind the whole in experience portals. Before we just jump into all the deep dive stuff, maybe one thing in advance, it's about the namings to avoid a bit the confusion there. We speak of experience portals, so product experience portals and also asset experience portals when we speak about the portal that is available to the user itself. And these portals are created with a tool, and this tool is called the portal engine, which is the tool that I'm going to present right now in this session. So if you like so, experience portals are powered by the portal engine. And yeah, to jump into the most important concepts, let me share my screen there. Hope you see now my screen because there I can show you a couple of things. And before we discuss all the detailed configurations, I want to discuss a couple of the basic concepts we chose when we set up and implemented the whole portal engine here. The first thing is that we see portals as standard Pimcore applications. That means we use or try to utilize as many as standard functionalities as possible of Pimcore and also use as many concepts as possible for setting up the portal engine. And that means, for example, that portals themselves are nothing more than just Pimcore sites with a couple of documents and also all the configuration of a portal, all the detailed settings are made within these documents and so can be set up by the admin user here. So portals as a site. This also means, of course, that the portals run under a separate domain. This is especially then useful when it comes for clean security and login management so that we can make sure that portals don't interfere with each other and really, the login is done properly. Besides the portals themselves, of course, we also have all the structure, all the navigation structure, then done with documents, and also the configuration of the data pools is done within documents. And data pools is already the next concept I want to discuss a bit more in detail. They are, if you like, so the heart of every portal because they define what data should be visualized in a data pool and or in the portal at all. And so they are the core of every portal. Every portal can have multiple of these data pools and they define a subset of the data that is managed within Pimcore, so a subset of assets or data objects, and you can so configure exactly what data should be available in the portal. We'll discuss all the detailed configuration settings there in a second, so don't get confused about this view right now. What is important to know, or one more thing that is important to know with the data pools is that every portal can have multiple of these data pools. So in fact, you can really configure as many data pools as you like for a portal and so really set up exactly what data should be published in the portal. The next basic concept or the next thing we need to know about the portals is that the whole search functionality and the whole filtering, also the whole listing of the data within the front end is done by Elasticsearch. So there we utilize Elasticsearch to provide proper filtering and search functionality, and of course also to have a good performance in the front end, especially for the listings in the portal. We just use the response of the Elasticsearch, and so we really have good response times there. This, of course, also has the consequence that the data that is shown in the portal needs to be indexed in Elasticsearch. This is done automatically in the background by some commands that need to be set up when you set up the portal engine and configure it. And we try our best to make this as real-time as possible. So normally all the changes that we do should be available right now, also in the Elasticsearch index, but it might be that certain bigger updates like doing huge moves, renamings, or changing data that is inherited to a lot of elements. In this case, it might be that it takes some time until the Elasticsearch index is up to date again. So this is just something we need to keep in mind there. So now we have already discussed 3 basic principles. We have this portals as a site and configuration with documents. We have the data pools, and we have the search and filtering via Elasticsearch. And the 4th concept I want to discuss is already quite in detail. This is all about user management and permissions. We decided to do user management with the portals with Pimcore data objects. So there we have 2 types of data objects. We have portal user groups and we have portal user objects. And every portal user object defines a user that has access to the portals. There we have a couple of base data like email, which is also the login, first name, last name, preferred language, these kind of things. Then every user can have certain permissions. Either he's an admin user, that means he has all the permissions, or as an alternative, we really can specify exactly to which portal a user should have access to, and also to which data pool of every portal, and even to certain features of a data pool really can be specified which the user is allowed to and what the user is not allowed to. In addition to the workspaces, we also have, in addition to the permissions, we also have the possibility to configure workspaces. Workspaces define to what data a user has access to on a global level. We will discuss this a bit in detail later on when we discuss the data pool settings, because then it makes much more sense. And the same also goes for the languages here. We'll discuss this in a second. Then in addition to the user data objects themselves, we also have groups, which allow us then a standard rules and user setup. So for these groups, we also can configure certain permissions, actually the same permissions we have for the users. We also can configure certain workspaces here and also the language settings here. And then we can assign multiple groups to user objects. And in this case, all the permissions, all the workspaces are merged together and so define what the user is allowed to do in the portal and what not. In some cases, it makes sense to have a link between a portal user and a Pimcore backend user. And in this case, we have the possibility to link them with each other. Examples for these cases are, for example, when we're updating assets in the portal, so we're uploading new assets or updating early metadata. And then we, of course, also want to properly set the user information in the Pimcore data, like user creator, use modification user, and also all the version owners. And so to do that properly, of course, we need a Pimcore user. And that's one of the reasons why it makes sense to link a portal user with a Pimcore backend user. Another example would be that it's also possible to access all the collections that are defined in the portals in the Pimcore backend. And so in the Pimcore backend, you can access all the data that is assigned to the collections, also modify the collections. And of course, we need to know to what collections a Pimcore user should have access to. Again, for this, we need a link between a portal user and a Pimcore backend user. Other things would conclude the workflows and the workflow actions that can be applied in the portal, and also, just a simple thing that you maybe not want to manage two passwords, one for the portals and the other one for the Pimcore backend, but just one password that applies to both. And to do this link between portal users and Pimcore users, we have this Pimcore user attribute here, where we can assign the corresponding Pimcore backend user. And if we want to use the same password for portal as well as the Pimcore backend, we just need to tick this checkbox here, and then the Pimcore backend password is used for authentication. This is an optional setting, so also the Pimcore user is optional. If no specific user is assigned, then the portal engine automatically maps all the other users to this portal engine default user. So this is also a way we can go. So now that we are already really deep into the details and configuration stuff of the portals, let's maybe really jump also right into the configuration of the data pools themselves. And let's just start with an asset data pool and really discuss one by one all the configuration options we have there. The first option or the first thing we can define here is the workspace. The workspace can be defined with folders, and so by just assigning folders out of the Pimcore asset tree in this case, we can exactly define which content should be available in the portal. And then by assigning the corresponding permissions there, we also can specify what actions are allowed to assets from the specific folder. So we really can there decide if we want just to view the assets, or we want to allow to download the assets, allow to update them, edit them, create them, delete them, manage subfolders. All these kind of things can be specified on the folder level. If you remember, we also have this workspace definition on the user, and these two workspace definitions interact with each other in this case, that the workspace definition on the user can further restrict the workspace definition of a data pool for this specific user. That means we can define a workspace definition for a data pool, which is quite global, for example, which allows a lot of things. And then we are able to specify for certain users or certain user groups that they are not allowed to either do certain actions like changing, updating, editing the assets, or we can also avoid that they can access certain folders at all. So we can just restrict the permissions on user level, but we cannot extend the permissions. So what we can't do is that we have a certain workspace definition here for the data pool, and then we add some additional folders on user level. This won't have any effect on data that is available in the data pool there. If for whatever reason it is not enough to define the workspaces just with folders, we also have the possibility to define so-called precondition services. That means that we can provide some Symfony services which implement some, specific conditions, some filtering based on certain metadata attributes, on certain permission properties whatsoever. And then we can also apply these condition services to the data pool configuration and further filter down the elements that are visible in the data pool. Next configuration step is the upload folder. We'll discuss this in a second later on, because this is a bit more complicated. Then we can set the navigation settings. We can enable, disable the folder navigation. We can enable, disable the tag navigation. And for the tag navigation, we also can specify the root tag of the Pimcore tags that should be used for building up the tag tree in the portal frontend. Next step is then to define the filters. So there we can add multiple filters, as many as we like. Of course, only a certain number of filters makes sense in terms of the user interface. For each filter, we can select the type between select and multi-select, and then we can specify the field that should be filtered on. And there we can select out of system attributes and also metadata attributes of the assets. Similar thing for sorting options. So again, we can define multiple sorting options, define the direction, ascending, descending, and then we also define which field should be sorted on. And last but not least, for the grid, we also can configure the attributes that should be shown in this table-like view in the grid. And again, we can choose from system attributes and metadata attributes there. Let's maybe quickly jump into the asset grid and once more see what we can configure there. First of all, we have all the assets that are available in this data pool defined with the workspaces. Then we have this navigation options there with folders and tags. And this tag tree here is built up on the root tag that we've defined as root tag in the configuration. Then we have up there all the filters that we want to use and on which fields they should apply to. Then we have this sorting by feature, and we have for the table-like view the attributes that should be shown there in the table that can be configured. Then let's continue with the configuration options, and now let's discuss the detail page configuration options. There we have actually 3 options that we can configure. The easiest one is that we can enable or disable the display of the version history. Then we can specify the attributes that should be shown in this general section of the overview tab of the detail page, again out of attributes from metadata. And then we can configure the direct download shortcuts we want to offer for the direct shortcut downloads links in the overview page. There we can choose out of any thumbnails that are defined within Pimcore backend and also the original asset itself. Let's maybe just open up a detail page there. And yeah, there are these general data attributes that can be shown and configured. And there we have this download shortcuts, which directly download the asset in the corresponding format. And there is this version tab that we can activate or deactivate in the configuration. Speaking of download, there we also have some configurations that can be made in the data pool configuration. First of all, we can choose again from all the different thumbnails that are configured in the system and also original and custom for the download of the asset itself. So with this setting, we define which options the user has in the portal for downloading the asset. And same also goes for the available download formats here for the metadata. It's actually also possible, of course, to extend this list by just providing your own implementations. Then if configured properly, they will appear in this list and you also can make them selectable in the front end. So these settings actually reflect the options that are available here in this download dialogues for downloading metadata and downloading the asset itself. And then last but not least, we have languages configuration. And for that, actually, we also need to discuss a bit more because we separate 2 different types of languages. First of all, there is the front-end language. This is the language in which the portal is, so in which all the labels are, in which all the content pages are that you define, and also where you can, of course, switch the language between these languages that are activated. So these are the front-end languages. And then we have the content language. The content language is independent from the front-end language. We always show all the different languages of the content. That means all the content of different language metadata. And also the same goes for the data objects and their relocalized fields. And with this setting here, we can define which content languages should be available in the portal. So we actually define which language tabs we have here in the metadata and which of them should be editable to the user. If you remember back to our user objects, there we had this language settings, this global language settings, and there the same goes as for the workspaces. So it is possible to further restrict the visible and the editable languages for a certain data pool on user level. So on user level, I can say this user should only be able to see, for example, the English content, but on the data pool level, I still could say, okay, I provide English and German and whatsoever. Yeah, so much for the asset data pool. We have one more small configuration opportunity there down there, which allows us to define the icon here. This icon is actually this icon here in this main navigation entries that can be configured here. Either you choose from the list here, or you also can assign an asset, which is then used as an icon. Then the next thing would be to discuss the object data pools, which actually follow the same principle, but since they are data objects and not assets, they have some different options here, but the logic and the basic idea is the same. First setting is already a difference. For the data objects, we need to define the data object class. So that means one data object pool is always just for one data object class. So it's just objects from, for example, your products, your customers, your whatever, in this case, our cars. Then next step is to define the workspace. Same principle as with the assets. So again, we can choose the folders and define the permissions we want to have there to define what actual content is available in the portal. If folder definition is not enough, we also can apply there a precondition service, as we did already also in our demo here, to filter, for example, for certain data attributes and show only actual cars in this case. Then again, we have this navigation settings available, and we also have, again, the possibility to define filters, again, multiple filters. Again, we can select the filter type, and we can choose from data attributes of the corresponding data object class. Then same goes for sorting options we can configure, and also we can configure the attributes that should be shown in the table-like view in the grid. So let's maybe quickly jump again back to the asset grid here, the data object grid, to see what we can configure. I think you get already the idea. All the items are defined with the workspaces. Navigation options are activated or deactivated based on the settings here. If no tags, for example, are assigned to any data objects here in the workspace, then of course the tag option here is not visible because it doesn't make any sense. Then we have the filter possibility here, again, to filter out the data. We have the sorting options, and we have, again, the attributes that are visible here in this table-like view. Next up is the detail page configuration. And this one I already also mentioned during the keynote demo. We define the detail page of every data object pool based on custom layouts of this class. I hope you know this feature. It can be configured directly in the class definition for any data objects, where we can define an additional view on the data and where we can decide exactly what elements should be available in what layout. And exactly this configuration we also use for the detail pages of our data pools for the data objects. And there we can choose from all the available detail page layouts that are available for this class. And then, in addition to the layout, we also can define if we want to see the version history or not on the detail page. So let's maybe open up the detail page of some nice car there. And yeah, this detail page, what information is there, in what tabs, in which order, and in which layout is all defined via the custom layout. And the versions, of course, is then based on the settings if we activate the versions or not. Then we have, again, download configuration. Again, we can specify the thumbnails that should be allowed to download. In this case, we can download all the data that is linked to the data object in terms of assets. So we look for all the asset data types in the data object class, and then we allow this to download. So this is this list that is applied here. So we have gallery, we have generic images. There we again can choose then from the different thumbnails and formats. And then we also can download the structured data here, which is again also configured here in this configuration. And same as for the assets, also for this list, you can provide your own implementation, your custom implementations, where you define your own format, of course, and also if you have some additional data you want to include in the download. And then last but not least, also for the data objects, we have this visible languages here, which can be configured. So actually, which language tabs should be available at this point here. And then there we also have once more the icon we can configure so that we have a nice icon for the navigation. So much for the data pool configuration. Let's maybe stick a bit into more the navigation in general and how we set up in general such a portal. So what we see here is actually already the tree that is available and builds up all the navigation structure and also the multi-language structure. So also for the multi-language here, we use Pimcore standard features like creating a document subtree for every language, and they're defining all the content for the corresponding language. With one difference to the standard Pimcore stuff, which is corresponding the data pools, because for the data pools, we don't want to replicate all the definition because, first of all, the definition is quite extensive and it might be quite a lot of work. And in addition to that, it also would recognize as an additional data pool in the system. And so it gets a bit messy. And for that, we have a special document type, which is a language variant reference for the data pool, where we can then define the different language, or no, we can define for all the languages and reference to the original data pool configuration. In this case, we reference for the asset material data pool, and then we have classic cars data pool reference and all these kind of things. So this is the only difference in terms of setting up the document structure. Besides that, you really can use all the standard Pimcore functionality also in terms of navigation stuff. So for example, here we have this statistics document, which is a standard document, a content document where we can add different area bricks and put in all our editorial content there. Of course, you also can extend the area bricks that should be available there. And we also can use navigation and these kind of properties, like, for example, exclude something from the navigation so that it's not visible in the main navigation here, but only reachable via some teasers from a dashboard page or whatsoever. So you really can easily set up all the structure and all the content there directly in the documents. Then we also have some general settings for the portal itself, which is, of course, a portal name, which is a logo, which is a background image for the login page, which is a separate logo for the email. The logo here is white. That's the reason why it's not really visible here. And then we also can define the footer, where we again use standard Pimcore tools and concepts, in this case a snippet, which then defines all the content of a footer. And actually we are separating two footers. We have this standard footer, which is used if a user is logged into the portal. And then we have a public footer, which is used for all the public share views. So there most probably are less links or different links in the footer than for the normal logged in user. For setting up a new portal, we recommend to use our wizards, and normally it should also work, not just like in the demo during the keynote here. Maybe let's just try it once more. And this wizard here creates you already all the basic structure of all the documents that are necessary. So it still doesn't work properly, I guess. Okay, no, it's still loading. And it's really, yeah, setting you up. Okay, again, it worked when I tried it in the break. Anyway, this wizard sets you up all the basic document structure already, so that you don't need to do all the work manually and set all the stuff manually. It really provides you already with setting this up, and so really makes it easier to start with all the portals and do all the stuff. So let's close this before it makes even more problems and errors. Let's close all the documents here. The last thing I want to show you, or I want to discuss with you, and then we have maybe some time also to answer some questions. The last thing I want to discuss with you here is how to customize the portals for your custom UI requirements, and also maybe for your custom functionality and yeah, customizations in general. And yeah, before we do this in detail, maybe some words about the technology that we are using for the portals. In the front end here, of course, these are standard Symfony applications with services, with all the container stuff of Symfony and these kind of things. For the standard templates, we are using Twig templates. And then for the more sophisticated front-end stuff, like the grid here, like the detail page, and also other listings and things where we provide lots of front-end side functionality, we are using React. And yeah, the user interface in general is based on Bootstrap. So these are the major technologies we are using there. And so based on these technologies, certain customizations come out of the box, and some of them we additionally added to the portal. The first possibility for customizing a portal is to defining certain colors and certain stylings directly here in this configuration. So that means that you can specify hex codes for different colors here. So let's maybe just change the header color and say we don't want to use gradients, for example, for the header. Save this, and then there we have this update frontend build button built in, which rebuilds the frontend. And then when we go back to our portal, we should see that now, for example, the header color changed. And so we have already some really easy possibilities to change the appearance of the portal and adapt it to your CI colors. In combination with, of course, the logo, it should be really easy to already customize a lot and make it look really in your certain CI. In addition to that, we have more advanced possibilities to customize the portal. And for that, maybe let's just jump in right into the documentation. So there it is, where we have this all documented, of course, and you see that all in detail. Let's maybe stick with customize the experience, the appearance of the portal. So besides defining some colors in the configuration document, you also have, of course, to override the Twig templates, where we use them just by overwriting certain blocks. So standard Twig functionality in terms of customizing and overriding Twig templates. And for overriding all the React stuff, or in general, also all the CSS stuff, which is powered by Sass, and we provide a concept which we call customized frontend build. And this one is based on Webpack and Webpack and Core to really allow you to override single files in all the React user interface and of course also in all the CSS files. And so you really can customize all the stuff that you see in the front end. This of course is a bit more complicated to set up, but as soon as it's set up, it's really great stuff. And you really can customize practically anything in this portal without overriding any core files or changing any core files. So this should give you great opportunity to really customize all the portals for your own needs. Then, in addition to customizing the appearance, we also have some additional entry points where you can customize the standard behavior of the portals. Like, for example, for the index itself, we can specify which attributes should be indexed. So of course there is standard out-of-the-box functionality, but if you want to extend this with additional attributes, you can do this with certain events where you can add additional data to the index. And then also it's possible to extend additional behavior, like all the names that are shown for data objects and assets. You can modify them. You can specify which preview image should be used for the data objects. You can specify these data exporters we saw for the downloading the structured data. We can add additional area bricks, can specify precondition services, and we have lots of events you can listen to and modify standard behavior. So it really is designed to be customized, to be extended, and so it should be really a great tool for you to create your experience portals. So that was it from my side so far. Let's see for the questions. So to be honest, this is just the first time we're doing this. So yeah, I'm not able to see, I think, all the questions that occurred during the session. So maybe if you have any questions, just put it in now. First is from Christian Schätzle. What is the main reason for using React and not Vue? Good question. It was a technology decision by our developers and by also, of course, the know-how we had. So, and also by the customizing and extension possibilities. So this is, there is no specific reason, at least I know of. So we set to React in this case because we knew it better. Okay, is there any other question? Julian asks pretty much the same question, so I don't have a different answer to that one. Anything else we should discuss? How to define which fields of relational fields get displayed? Actually, all the relational fields are displayed if you have it in your custom layout defined. And for defining what data of the relation should be displayed, we're using these name extractors you saw before. And let's maybe just open up a detail page of a data object there. There is a default implementation. Don't know why the internet is so slow right now. And this default implementation checks if the linked element, so in this case a data object, has a name attribute, then the name is shown at this point. If there is no name, then the object key is used. And there it's always possible, of course, to customize this behavior and do whatever data what you're using. So yeah, this ES7 question I have to take with me and discuss this internally to give you the reason why we didn't use that. As far as I know, we already stick to the most advanced JavaScript stuff, but of course we also need to provide great browser compatibility. So we of course need to stick to that. and it just seems logical to us to use React for this case. Then one question is from Julian, who asks if we will to migrate the portal into Data Hub. I saw already that there was also a discussion during the keynote going on about this stuff. Okay, Stefan. Well, let's first stick to Julian in terms of in terms of the GraphQL. Right now, we don't have any plans to really migrate it because we don't really see the benefit out of it, because the endpoints we created for the portal engine are really very custom for this use case we have there. So we don't see the benefit for providing them to general. And also we are not using GraphQL at this point, but really just a simple REST endpoint, because it was easier for us to implement it this way. But yeah, never say never. It can be, of course, somewhere in the future, but right now there is not such point on the roadmap. Then back to Stefan's questions in terms of Elasticsearch and not JavaScript. Sorry, I missed that. As far as I know, it should also, of course, support Elasticsearch 7. So we don't using any deprecated stuff of Elasticsearch 6. And so it should also run on Elasticsearch 7. If not, then we, of course, will provide this in near future. To be honest, we didn't test it yet, but there is no reason why we stick to Elasticsearch 6. Of course, our goal is to support Elasticsearch 6 as well as Elasticsearch 7. And then Sebastian Drickel asks, can you describe how deep Elasticsearch is integrated inside Pimcore? I think this will be a bit too big for this session right now. Right now, the core of Pimcore doesn't use Elasticsearch. We have just a couple of integrations with Elasticsearch, like for the e-commerce framework, like for this advanced object search, like for now the portal, and also some Data Hub extensions we have there. And yeah, so it's a very loosely coupled integration. Let's put it that way. Then there is one more question from Rad van Velden, who asks about cron jobs or messaging. Actually, we need both. We have cron jobs for keeping the index up to date, so the Elasticsearch index. So these are things that should be set up with cron jobs. And then we use the messaging queues, that I get it out, primarily for front-end tasks that run asynchronously, like packing together all the zip files for download, or like uploading stuff, or like batch editing for metadata and these kind of things. So these are the places where we're using the Symfony messaging queue. And so actually we need both of them. Then Johan Lindgren asks if we can combine it with the e-commerce framework. This is indeed a very interesting question, and it's also somewhere on our virtual roadmap. But right now, out of the box, it's not possible to combine it. You, of course, can always combine it in terms of any customization, and can put some checkout process somewhere to the portals here. Right now, it's not out of the box available, but of course you can do it in customizations. Then there is one more question from Jan, which is, can you edit object data from within the portal? The answer to that question is no. Data objects are only read-only. Assets, metadata are also for editing. Okay, so I guess we are pretty much at the end of the session.